Thanks for tuning in, everyone, to another episode of Let's Talk, the show where we just sit down with interesting people from various walks of life, kind of talk about their journey and what it is they do. Before we get started, be sure to hit that subscribe button, click that bell so you see when new videos come out, and we're going to go ahead and dive in here. I have with me today Ivan Scott. Thanks for being here, Ivan.
I tell you, Eric, it's great to be here, and love to talk about books, love to talk anything you want to talk about, and hopefully your listeners will be interested to hear about.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So, if I understand this correctly, you live in Georgia,
Yep,
and
Atlanta, Georgia.
and I don't want to spend too much time on this right now, but what is Georgia like right now?
Georgia is it's interesting. On one side, when you get close to the downtown, the Buckhead area, and the Midtown downtown area, it's a little more intense with things going on,
Mm-hmm.
and I totally, I understand it. I get it. Things are kind of in the world in general between the virus and between the Black Lives Matter and the stuff that's been going on. I could totally understand it. So, but when you get out to the suburbs, you see some of that, but it's not as intense. So it just depends on what part of Atlanta that you're in. So.
Okay. Yeah, and that makes sense. Okay. And I don't want to spend too much time on it. I know you're from Atlanta and being in it, I'm sure you have a different perspective than people outside of it. So.
Well, Eric, what's funny about that is that the when the riots hit, in downtown, I worked at CNN Center. One of my first jobs was an intern at CNN Sports way
Okay.
back then. I know exactly where that was. And then in Buckhead, the shops that were set on fire, looted, those kind of things where the damage was. My wife and I have spent a lot of time down there, and a lot of where my book takes place was written about that part of Atlanta. And
Really?
so kind of crazy. When I was watching all this stuff, I was like, oh my goodness, it's a lot different than when I wrote about it.
Oh
So
my
yeah,
gosh. That's
but hopefully
crazy.
we're all yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. So, obviously an author, why don't you go ahead for people watching and kind of talk about who you are, where you're from, all that good stuff.
Sure, sure. Well, my name is Ivan Scott, and I've been in Atlanta for about 30 years. I grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, still have family up there.
Okay.
That's where I went to school. My first job when I came to Atlanta was public relations intern with the Atlanta Braves, and then I did some video with them. Interned at CNN Sports, so I kind of have a sports background, but
Wow.
things have kind of changed over, like I said, I've been here 30 years, so things have kind of changed. And writing is something I've always wanted to do, and I finally got serious and just buckled down and did it. But I have lots of interesting stories from my times at the Braves. I worked at World Championship Wrestling, worked at CNN, so all kinds of crazy stories about that I could tell. Actually, that should be what my next book should be about.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. How'd you get into something like that, like with the Braves and everything? How'd that start?
Yeah, well, my major was communications, and I had a sports background. I did a lot of radio play-by-play and was the station manager at the campus radio station at East Tennessee State. So I had that on my resume, and I had some friends that kind of worked in the industry, and they said, well, you should talk to this person. What about this person? Send a resume here. So basically, it was just one of those where I came down as soon as I graduated from college. Came down for an interview, and I was very fortunate, very lucky, and very blessed to get the job. And it's kind of how it gets started. Eric, it's funny. I'm sure with your jobs as well. It's one of those where once you get your foot in the door, and then it's like, well, I started here, and now look, it's
Yeah.
what's happened. So it's a crazy journey.
Yeah, that's exactly how it happens. And I know a lot of people who are in like the IT field as well, and they say the same thing. The hardest part is getting in. Once you're in any facet at all, then you're in the industry. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's interesting. That's the same way. So obviously we're here to talk about your book. You're an author. Why don't you kind of go ahead? I'm going to throw it up on the video for everyone to see. Um, Redhead in a Blue Convertible. It's on Amazon.
It is on Amazon, and it's on
Okay.
BarnesandNoble.com as well. If you like e-versions, there's an e-version on Amazon. And then also there's an audio version on Amazon as well. So if you go to my Amazon page, you can see the e-version, the paperback version, and the audio version. So
Okay.
whatever taste that you have, hopefully I've fulfilled it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll be sure in the description below to put a link to your Amazon page so everybody can check it out there. Why don't you go ahead, kind of tell us what the book's about and how you came up with it?
Sure. It's interesting as I've gotten older. I've played softball pretty much all my life. As soon as I got into college, I used to play baseball, and I'm like, I can't do it anymore, so I played softball. And so now, I'm into my 50s, and the new crop of kids have come along, and I'm on the team, and I'm the old fossil now on the team. So they always tease me all the time. It's like, hey, did they have to teach history when you were in school?
Yeah, all the good
I get
jokes.
those jokes, all the time. I got one where the guy was like, "Hey, did your last birthday cake look like a prairie fire?" So I'm like, "Yeah, okay, yeah, I've heard them all." So,
Yeah.
but the reason why I tell you about that is that as I've gotten older, I'm not able to do the things that I was once able to do, and it's kind of sad. It's like, wow, I can't, play 5 games of softball every week, or I
Mm.
can't, do these kind of things. I'm just getting too old, I can't do it anymore. And so that's kind of the idea behind the book. The male protagonist in the book has gotten to a point where he's sad because a lot of his life is over now because he's gotten older. He doesn't have a family anymore. He never got married. He had one love interest, and you'll read it in the book what happened with her. But he's by himself, and so he's got 24 hours to visit all the places that were dear to him and see all the people that were dear to him before he has to leave town. He needs somebody to help him drive around town. And so, just by coincidence, through friends, kind of like how I got my job through friends, he meets a very dashing redhead who is a doctor in Atlanta who kind of runs into some adversity of her own, where she loses a patient on the operating table.
Mm.
Her mother is also a heart surgeon. And so, when she finds out about this, her mother kind of disowns her, shuns her, tells her she's, the worst person in the world. And so, she kind of goes into abyss. So you've got Sarah, who's the doctor, and then you've got Billy, who's the older gentleman. And so they kind of come together and they help each other out. She drives for him because he can't drive any longer and takes him to the places where, that were very special to him. And where I got that idea from, I wrote a story once about a older woman who was picked up late night at her house. And I guess it was an Uber driver or a taxi driver. And so her bags were all packed, and he figured she was going to the airport. She was going on a trip. So they get into the taxi cab, and so he asked, "Where do you want to go?" And she's like, "Well, I want to go here." And so it turns out this was the place where she met her husband. Next place they go, this is where the place where their kids went to school. This is where their kids were born. This is where their daughter was married. This is where
Yeah.
they had these great talks. And so it dawns on the driver, wait a minute, we're not really going to. She's not traveling anywhere. I wonder what's going on here. So she takes him to all the places that were special to her. And the last place that they go to is a retirement facility. And so he drops her off there because she knows her life is pretty much over now. She's not going to be able to do the things that she
Mm.
once was able to do and see the places that were special to her. So she has one final, kind of tour of the great things in her life before she has to go into this retirement facility.
Mm.
So that got me thinking, if that was me, who would I see? What would I do?
Yeah.
Feel like. And I think that's the challenge. Eric, if you want to think about all the places that are special to you and the people that are special to you. And if you had 24 hours to visit those places and see those people, what would that feel like? What would you do? And that's kind of the inspiration behind the book. And I think, the people that read it can kind of put themselves in Billy's position or in Sarah's position and say, wow, I have 24 hours. What would I do with it? So that's kind of the idea behind the book.
Man.
And as they go along, they kind of, gel together. There's a little bit of a romance there, even though he's not old like in his 80s, but he's older than Sarah is. But they kind of have a little bit of a romance. They kind of have a thing for each other, but realize that once this 24 hours is up, he has to leave Atlanta. And you'll find out the reasons why in the book. But after 24 hours, they have to go their separate ways. So that's kind of the inspiration behind the book. And hopefully the reader, once they read it, will kind of put themselves in those positions and say, wow, if this was me, what would I do?
What a great question to just the premise, just the idea, and a question that everyone should really be asking themselves, right? Like, what do you do when you know you have 24 hours? What do you do?
Yeah.
You don't sleep. That's answer one. Is you're not sleeping. Well, first, you look great. I would not have guessed you're 50. You look fantastic. I want you to know that.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you tell my wife that too? Can you send her an email and say, hey, this guy looks pretty good on
Absolutely.
here. You got to hold on.
Yeah, I absolutely will. I absolutely send you an email so you can crop it out to her. So it's on Amazon. Everyone check it out. I'm going to ask some more questions that may go into spoiler territory. We'll try to avoid them. But for everyone watching, before we dig in a little deeper, check it out on Amazon and beware. We may give minor spoilers. So Sarah, was that her name in the book? Sarah?
Huh? Yeah.
You said she was a surgeon, loses someone on the table. Was that difficult for you to write? Do you know someone where that happened to, where you kind of was like, hey, how's that feel? Like, what do you do?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I get this question a lot, not only with the operating room scene, but the scenes that I write. People ask, well, where did you get your idea for that? Where did you get your inspiration? Where did you get the facts for it? And I think, just the first part of that question, as an author, I think it's a huge responsibility. You have to get it right
Right.
because you are kind of taking the reader by the hand and you're saying, trust me, I'm going to tell you a story.
Yeah.
And those facts should be
Absolutely.
truthful and they should be accurate in the story.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you lose your credibility. So for the operating room scene, fortunately, I have my sister is a emergency room nurse, and so I asked her. I said, "Well, what's it like?" Because her husband is a emergency doctor. He's a
Mm.
ER doctor.
Mm.
So I said, "What's it like to lose a patient on the table?" Because he's told us stories before about it. And so she went through and said, he felt this way. This is what happened here. This is what happened when we had to tell the family members after it was over. So I was able to write all of that down and kind of digest and kind of feel the emotion and the facts behind what she was telling me. And those I was able to put in the book. And obviously, I have not been in that situation. So I 100% cannot relate completely to it, but hopefully I was able to write it up as when the reader reads it, they'll be put in that moment and they can kind of feel those emotions, because it is a pretty tough thing. My sister told me that her husband, for a couple days after a patient that he lost on the table, he you know lamented about it. He
Sure.
was worried about it. He was like, wow, gosh, I thought I was this great doctor and I
Yeah.
wasn't able to save the person. Those kind of, you have that guilt,
Yeah.
but that kind of thing. So, and those are some of the things in the book. And the funny thing is that mothers and daughters have a very unique relationship. And we have two kids. We have a son and a daughter. So I see that now with my daughter and my wife and the relationship that they have together. And so I incorporated some of that relationship in the book, not what we have here, because we have a very healthy, constructive, very good
Yeah.
relationship. But in the book, the mother is very domineering. Nothing is ever good enough for her. Sarah says, "Well, I finished top 10 in my class," and her mother comes back with, "Well, if you would have studied a little harder, you would have been
Mm.
number one in your class." Those kind of things that
Mm.
just that
Mm.
kind of dynamic. And so when the patient dies on the table, Sarah, all she's ever wanted to do is please her mother, be worthy of her, those kind of things. And when that happens, the mother totally goes off on her. And, she's already in a bad place already. She's already feeling guilt. This is my
Yeah.
fault. If I was better, this wouldn't have happened, those kind of things. And then you pile what her mother says to her and some of the
Man.
phrases that she says to her. And it's just,
Man.
she just sinks like a rock. And,
Man.
and so that was when you ask about tough scenes to write, the operating room was tough, but I think the mother daughter afterwards,
Mm.
there was times where I kind of, had to back away from it because I started,
Yeah.
get a little, teary eyed or a little emotional when I was like, thinking, wow, it was a little heavy, but I think it helps you fall in love with Sarah a little bit more. And,
Yeah.
basically you want to take her and give her a hug and say, hey, it's going to be okay.
Yeah. That's so interesting. It sounds like, based on your research and your writing, um, I've had a few people on here. Sean Paul Murphy is one of them, where we we kind of talked about suicide because he had some people near dear to him that committed suicide, and then I had a friend whose brother committed suicide growing up, and it sounds like similar questions arise, where it's what could I have done?
Yeah.
What did
Yeah.
I do wrong? I
And
spent
that's the
time
thing.
around them. Why wasn't I aware? Why didn't I do anything? Or in the doctor, like, was there something in my training or in my schooling that I missed that would have helped me? It sounds like similar questions.
Yeah, it totally is. And the tough thing is that you'll never get an answer to it. And that
Yeah.
it'll drive you crazy because, a lot of times in our life, we can fix things. It's like, I did this, it was a mistake. I'm going to do this and it'll all go away and it'll be better. But in that case, when I lost my father, it was the same thing. There was no, well, I'll see him tomorrow, or this will all
Right.
pass and he'll be, those kind of things. And so that's when, and Sarah even goes to get help in the story. She goes to see a psychologist and somebody that helps her because she's just like you were just saying,
Yeah.
you wonder, but you can never find answers to those
Yeah.
questions, and that's when sometimes you have to reach out.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a good point. Even aside from what happens in your story, like for anyone listening out there who you're stuck in the rut of depression and all those questions, talk to somebody. Talk to
Yes.
somebody, a friend. Go seek medical help. A psychologist, whatever. Talk to somebody because it's just going to fester inside of you and destroy you. Um, is Billy based off you?
He is. I wish I had his money. I wish I had
Yeah.
his car. I had his good looks. It's funny because writing a character like Billy was so much fun because I'm sure that Eric, you probably have men that like maybe John Hamm or Tom Brady, whoever. You got somebody that's like, wow, what would it be like to be him
Yeah,
for a day?
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of how I felt with Billy. He's he's a gentleman. Um, he's all the women love him, but not, not in a sexual way where he, has sex with all these women. It's not anything like that, but it's more of an admiration kind of thing.
Sure.
Everywhere they go, and even Sarah picks out, it's like, wow, is there not a woman around here that doesn't swoon in his presence? Those kind of things. And so I think we all wish that we could walk into a room and all the,
Oh, everyone.
yeah, would be,
Everyone.
so
Yeah.
writing Billy was a lot of fun because I could jump into that and say, wow, what would it be like to be him per day? Well, let me just write it out. And he's loves Four Roses bourbon, so he's up on his bourbons.
Okay. Good. Good. That was the concern.
Yeah, yeah. So you got to have his drink. And it's funny because Sarah is an Irish whiskey drinker, which didn't go real well in our house because I based some of Sarah off my wife, who's also a redhead. So she's like, well, I drink Chardonnay and I drink champagne. I don't drink Irish whiskey. So I had to smooth that out just a little bit and say, okay, look, in the next book, I'll.
Sure. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Billy is a lot of fun. He is a big literature buff, and so he has a lot of quotes for things about life. He quotes Hemingway, he quotes Fitzgerald, he quotes Emily Bronte. Just quotes about life and how wonderful it is and how we should appreciate it. And I think the other thing that Billy tries to impart his wisdom to Sarah is that, hey, I'm kind of at the end of my heyday. My time is over. You have your life in front of you. Don't squander it. Don't waste it, because you're going to wake up one morning and you're going to say, wow, why didn't I take that trip? Why didn't I tell this person I love them? Why didn't I write this book? Those kind of things. And so I think that's another thing I hope the reader gets out of it is that, hey,
Gosh.
we have this wonderful life ahead of us. Don't squander it. You have all these great opportunities. Like we were talking about earlier. Don't sleep for 24 hours.
Don't sleep.
Yeah, don't go out and do those kind of things, because one day you're going to be in a situation where it's like, wow, the window's closed. I wish I would have done that.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the things about Billy that I loved writing about it is, and I see it. It's like, wow, I can't do the things I once was able to do. So I want to make sure that the people coming behind me don't, and I don't think I squandered my opportunities. But,
Sure.
Yeah, I wish I had those opportunities again. To be honest.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a little younger than you. I'm 30. A little younger.
But you're looking good.
Thank
you're
you.
Looking good.
Thank you. Thanks everyone. Thank you. But I already kind of feel that, and it's like the draw towards like, what was I doing in high school? Like, why did I waste all those years? And like shortly after, beginning to college and stuff like that, I was like, what was I doing? Why didn't I read more? Why didn't I learn more? Why didn't I go out and do stuff so I have something to talk about?
Yeah.
Is there anything that stands out in your mind of like something you're like, man, I wish I would have done that? Like hiking more? I mean, is there anything that you're willing to talk about that stands out?
Yeah, I have a bad fear of heights and a bad fear of flying, and so I'm not. And like you said, this is one of my regrets, and I still have time to do it, so that's not a problem. I'm slowly getting over that fear of flying and those kind of things, but I wish I would have traveled more. I wish
Yeah.
that I would have gone to Australia. I wish I would have went to Europe. I wish I would have seen the World War II battlefields, which I'm a big World War II buff. I wish I would have gone there, or I wish I would have gone to certain places and those kind of things. The other thing, thinking about it, I started writing this book, and I did write a book back in 19. I'm sorry. I started in 95 and I finished it in about 2002. It was self-published, and so basically it was just a book that I wrote.
Sure.
And I was looking at it thinking, okay, 2002, and I started writing this book in 2018, 16 years, and I didn't write anything. I lost 16 years. I wish I would have gotten serious about it. But, the big thing is that, we can't ever go back and reverse time. But what we can do is we can say, all right, starting right now,
Yeah.
boom, I'm not going to live that life anymore. I'm going to do the things that I've always wanted to do, and I'm not going to worry about it. So I think we always have that opportunity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I completely agree with you. Absolutely. And it's always tough because you're like, man, even now I'm sure you have days you're like, man, I should have been writing. Man, I should have been doing this. But like, even in those 16 years where you weren't writing, you were getting experience. You were learning in life. And that helps with writing. It helps with connecting people. So it definitely
Yeah.
wasn't wasted. But yeah,
No, you're absolutely right. And I think you made a great point. Is I think that if I tried to write this book 16 years ago, it might not have been
yeah,
as impactful as it is. But you nailed it. It's like those life experiences and the heartbreaks and the joys and the those great moments that come in our lives that you never forget. Um, you know, 16 years earlier, those wouldn't have happened. And so
right,
how could I put them in the book? So yeah, I think
yeah.
your point is very valid.
Your book sounds like it's an emotional roller coaster, like in a good way, where it
Uh-huh.
hits real stuff,
Yeah.
real stuff. Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Eric, it's funny that you mentioned that because there's a couple of scenes that in the book that I wrote that in real life happened after the fact, and that's the thing that kind of it
So
just creeps me out.
after you wrote it, you
Yeah,
experienced it.
yeah.
Okay.
And I'll give you just two quick examples. Maybe there's just two of them. When there's a scene in the book where they go to the Atlanta Botanical Garden, and every Christmas they have a light show there, and it's just this wonderful where they play this great symphony music, and they have these wonderful lights hanging from the trees. It's kind of like what you would imagine heaven being. You walk through these tunnels, they have these just brilliant, colorful lights and all, and it's crazy. So I wrote a scene in the book where Billy and Sarah are dancing to a song Claire de Lune, which is Claude Debussy's favorite song. I'm sure it was in Ocean's 11. It's a very popular
Okay.
song. Um, but at the time when I got the inspiration for it, when we were at the Atlanta Botanical Garden, it was a different song. So I just substituted Claire de Lune because I liked the song better. It was beautiful and all that. So fast forward to this past December, after the book had been out 4 or 5 months, we're walking up to the same place in the Atlanta Botanical Garden. The lights come on, and instead of the song from last year, it was Claire de Lune, and I was like,
Wow. Wow.
"Oh God!"
Wow. Out
Like,
of all the
wow.
songs they could have chosen, that one.
Yes, and so
Wow.
yeah, absolutely. And so I just kind of sat there, and luckily I got video of it. I got my phone on, and got video of it. But I was like, wow, this is
Yeah.
exactly how I envisioned it, before this actually happened. And so I got a little creeped out, but in a good way, though. Those kind of
Yeah.
things. So,
Yeah,
and
that's
then the
amazing.
second thing, there's a part in the book where they're at a used bookstore, and Billy's taking Sarah around to show her some of his favorite authors, some of his favorite books, and quote some life quotes to her, those kind of things. And so I wrote in a scene where one of the employees is an older woman who has known Billy since he was little. She knew his mother, and so when Billy was little, the mother would bring him to the bookstore and so on. So she walks in and says, she says, "Hello, Billy. Wow, it's great to see you. Wow." And she puts her hand over her heart. "Wow, you look amazing," or whatever.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
I'm working a book fair about 6 months later, and the woman that I wrote that was the inspiration for the scene, she walks into the room where I'm working, and I never done this. She's never done this before. She put her hand over her heart and go, "Oh my goodness, Ivan! Wow, you look amazing." And I was like,
Did she read the
"Okay."
book? Did she read the book?
Yeah, and I thought that, and she hadn't gotten a copy of the book, so she was
Wow.
honest with that, but ooh,
Wow.
it was a little scary.
Wow. So, are there any places they visit in the book that you hold dear? Are all the places you hold dear?
Yeah, there's a few places that are very special, that because like I said, I've been here 30 years, and so when I go to these places, it's kind of like, wow, when I first saw this place I was a young man, and now I'm an older man, and so it kind of tweaks me a little bit. The used bookstore that they go to, actually it's no longer in Atlanta, but that was a very special place for me, so I wanted to include it in the book. um, the place where my wife and I had our first date is one of the places where they go
Okay,
for,
that's sweet.
to eat. So that was
Yeah.
kind of a neat thing. Uh, the Atlanta Botanical Garden, like I said, that scene there, that was kind of a cool thing. Um, and yeah, so yeah, I think a lot of the places are very dear. And hopefully, when the reader looks at the book, they can kind of say, that reminds me of this special place that I liked, or I met my wife here. That kind of reminds me of that kind of scene. So hopefully, I've laid that out for whoever reads the book.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's incredible. Um, you've obviously lived a very exciting life, working for the Braves, doing the wrestling stuff. You do film now, right?
Yeah, video production.
Video
Yeah,
production. Okay.
yeah.
Uh, how much of that translates to writing? Is there anything you
Yeah,
learned along the way?
yeah, that's a great question. I think that this take it off the top with video production. With video production, you're telling a story. You're using
Yeah.
visuals, you're using audio, you're using graphics, and you're trying to reach inside whoever's watching that, grab a hold of them, and get them emotionally attached to the story, so it holds their interest. Same kind of thing in writing, only you use words to describe things, but the premise is still the same. It's like I want to reach inside whoever's reading that book, and I want to grab their heart, and I want them to be emotionally involved in the story. And so that, doing video production is very similar. And I think it's been a help, because sometimes when I'm writing, I'll think, okay, well, if I was going to put this scene, if I was going to shoot this scene, and what kind of music would I
Yeah.
use? What would the visual be? Would it be a sunset? Would it be starry night? Those kind of things. And so I think that's a big help. I think the other thing that's really helped with writing, and you talk about all these different experiences, some of the funny things that happen in the book are actual experiences that happen with the Braves, or at World Championship Wrestling, or when I was working in, CNN, wherever. Some of the things that happen just in our house, I'm like, wow, that would make a
Yeah.
pretty funny anecdote. And so it's neat because, maybe 20, hopefully I'm still alive in 20 years, but 20 years from now, I can pick up this book and read that, and read, a chapter, and think, oh, I remember when that actually happened. And so it kind of, that's one of the other great things about writing that I really like to do, is you have a history of your life. And that, pretty much never goes away. You always have
Yeah. What a what a blessing for you. That's
it.
that's so great. Uh, so I'd like to talk about your life working for the Braves. What is it you? What is it you? We're going to transition there. We'll bring it back to writing later. What
All right.
what is it exactly you did?
Oh, I was public relations, and I did some video as well. They opened up it's funny because now all the sports teams had these high tech video, rooms and all that.
Mm-hmm.
When I did it, and this was in 1992, we used VHS tapes, and we would put it in. We would hit record when a batter would come up to the plate, and then when he would,
Oh my
hit,
god.
strike out, whatever, then we would take the tape out, put the next player's tape in, whoever would come
Oh
up,
my
and that's how we would
gosh.
do it. So it's crazy how, those things, have changed over the years. Now everything's computerized and all that, and you don't have a big stack of tapes. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's how we would do
You must have ended with a mountain of tapes every game.
it. Pretty
Every game.
much. Yeah.
What
Yeah.
what's it like? What's the energy in that room, or in the production team? What's the energy like before the game starts
Yeah.
for the crew?
Yeah, what's interesting about that? When I did that for the Braves, it was just me in a room, so there wasn't anybody else with me. But I do have a story to relate. Like I said, when I was interning with CNN, I also did some freelance stuff with, like, the NCAA basketball tournament, or with college football games, that kind of thing. So I was in a production truck, and Eric, I can tell you, it is, you better put on two thick skin jackets in that, because the language, let it just put it that way, the
Okay,
language, and of course the language is not delivered at a very low,
of
calm,
course.
a lot of it's a little, a little heated, a little direct, a little to get your attention, those kind of things. um a lot of it you can never really take personally, because it was just in the heat of the moment, where somebody
Sure.
would, get your, what out of your, and that kind of thing. And then, maybe 10 seconds later, the next play would start, and it would all be forgotten, and you're on to the next thing. So it was, yeah. But, the other thing that was interesting when I first started being an intern, I would sit in the truck and kind of get some experience that way. But what they would have us do is they would have us log tapes. And so they would say, okay, mark that for me. So, a great catch. Okay, it was at 16:59. So they knew at halftime, okay, let's go back to 16:59. I know where that
Okay.
highlight is.
Yeah.
So sometimes during the game, the director or producer or whoever's in the truck would say, hey, Ivan, go get me a cup of coffee. And it's like, no problem. And then you go do it. So a lot of times you swallow your pride, and you think, this is just part of it. I have to learn the ropes, and I got to, do the menial tasks and all that. But yeah, thick skin and swallowing your pride were big assets back then. So, and I learned a lot. But yeah, so sometimes in those trucks, yeah, it was a little chippy.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet the thick skin and the swallowing pride. I feel like that's for every avenue of life. Like
Yeah,
any place you want to excel, especially when you're dealing with the public, you got to have thick skin.
yeah, Absolutely.
And,
Yeah. When you're at absolutely. Because, and I have a special place in my heart for people that are in customer service,
oh yeah,
because most of the time, the only time that they're going to interact with people is when people have a problem or they're
oh,
really upset.
that was my
So
job
it's
for a
like,
couple
wow.
years. Yeah,
Oh, okay. So you
yeah.
know all
I
about it.
was the I
Yeah.
was the one who they said, "Hey, I'm mad. I want to talk to a supervisor." Like they went to me. So so yeah, that's what I did. And in that scenario, and I think it's similar. Like in anyone in a business where that's happening, it's like you realize they're angry with the situation in the company, not you,
Right.
and you just do your best to help.
Yeah. You're just kind of there as the
That's
representative for
right.
them. Yeah. No, yeah, I think you summed it up perfect there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. And then the other thing you said, swallowing your pride. It's one thing to like to know you're good at something, but it's another thing to come off as the guy who knows that he knows he's good at something. If I
Mhm.
said that well.
Yeah.
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 So
Well, I think the other thing is, and I don't want to, make it sound like it's a demeaning thing or they're hazing you or anything like that. But I think that's kind of how they, were brought up. They, kind of had
yeah.
to, earn their spurs, so to speak, and they pass on to you. And then, but with me, I was never in a position to order anybody to go get me coffee or anything. But I don't think I ever would, just because I know, hey, this is one of those things. But that's the way the business is sometimes. The thing that I wonder about is that sometimes with generations they might say, well, I don't. Why don't you go get your own coffee? I shouldn't go get you coffee. That kind of thing. And so I tell all of my students that want to get into video production, it's like, hey, it's not anything that they are demeaning you or trying to haze you or
Right.
make you feel, whatever. It's just part of the business,
And
and you just do what they ask you to do, and you do earn points that way, because then they're like, hey, I want to work with this
right.
person again. Hey, he's pretty good. That kind of
Right. And that's what I was going to say. And then, like, I don't think anyone should take a request like that to be demeaning or anything like that. I'm sure a lot of people do, but, like, whenever you're new, they have to
Yes.
learn the level in which they can trust you. And even if
Yep.
it's just go get a cup of coffee, like, you're developing the trust with the people who matter. And so whenever important stuff comes along, they're like, hey, I trust you that you can do this.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's how you rise up in the ranks of anything, really. Like, prove that you're trustworthy, prove that you can do the job. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, take it a step further, Eric. And yeah, while you're getting them coffee, maybe you're thinking to yourself, okay, how can I help them improve their production? How can I do
Yeah.
such and such? And that way you bring in their coffee and say, hey, I prepared these stats, or I know where this footage is, that kind of thing. And so maybe, like you said, you earn their trust. And while you're earning their trust, here's something that I can help you with. Why don't you think about this? Well, what about this? And
Yeah.
so you're constantly using your brain to kind of advance yourself. So that's another thing that I always tell my students, is always be thinking about, hey, how can I make this better?
Yeah. I, gosh, such great advice. And also, I don't know if you're this way, but whenever I'm stuck, whenever like I'm working on a book and I don't know what to write, the thoughts aren't coming, I like to take a walk. So going to get someone coffee, that's a great way.
Yes.
It's a remedial task. Not a lot of thought involved, so my brain can think of other things. Yeah.
Yes.
Are you the
Well,
same way?
sometimes, or I was just going to say, sometimes your brain should not think about anything for 5 minutes. And then
Sure.
it's kind of like rebooting a computer.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So whenever you did wrestling, was it similar? Were you doing PR for wrestling as well?
Well, I did the 900 line, the hotline where people would call up, and it
Okay.
was 99 cents a minute, and we would record interviews with wrestlers, and we'd have like a trivia contest, and so people can win prizes as well. But they'd like to hear wrestling interviews, and then at the live events they could actually talk to the wrestlers. So a guy would, before he would go out for his match, hey, catch so and so before they go out, and to their match. So that was kind of cool. And growing up, I was a wrestling fan.
Yeah.
I enjoy it. It was a lot of fun, and all that. And so I was like, wow, I can't believe it. I'm actually seeing these guys that I grew up watching. And wrestling was a great experience. I learned a lot. The wrestlers were crazy, but fun kind of crazy. Just a zest for life. I walked in one morning, Monday morning after a event, and there was a huge hole in a wall. And I thought, wow, I wonder what happened there. And apparently, a couple of the wrestlers were kidding around and joking around after one of the matches, and one threw the other one into the wall. So I was like, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, but it was a great time. Learned a lot. I, you know, and seeing these guys, it was funny because, and of course we know all about wrestling now. Back then it was a much deeper guarded secret. But, I would see the guys before the matches and they'd be, okay, now don't forget, now 5 minutes in, you're going to throw me here and I'm going to catch you. So they would all, but and the reason why I tell that story is that you see these guys and they're yelling at each other in interviews and it's this feud, and if they get bloody and they, whatever. But these guys are really, they're hard workers. They stick to a script. They have to trust each other. It's like, hey, if I'm going to lift you up in the air and throw you, I got to make sure that you're not going to hurt me. I want to, those kind of things. And so it was really great to see how hard they worked to put these wrestling matches on, and the bumps and bruises that they would encounter, and then still go out and do it. There was one wrestler. He was Cactus Jack in World Championship Wrestling, and I forget what it was in WWE, but he got his ear caught in one of the ropes, and it sliced the ear off. And so, they had to stitch it back on and that kind of thing. But I'm thinking, wow, these guys really sacrifice their bodies for the sport and for their livelihoods. So it was, and I think that's why I say it was such a memorable experience, because, you see people, going to work and they work 9 to 5 and they work hard and they take nothing away from them. And then you see another side of somebody making a living where they do something completely different, that their bodies just get, mangled and all that, but they still are in there, doing their thing. So that was an amazing thing.
Yeah. If you're in that arena of life, you just have to love everything about that, right? Because you're getting hurt daily. Like, you have to really just love what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was the energy kind of the same when in the room whenever a match was starting in wrestling?
Yeah, it was. We had Gordon Soley, who's probably the #1 Hall of Fame wrestling announcer ever. I got to work with him, and again, that was one of the amazing things. The stories that he told about, his days announcing were just crazy. So I got to work with him. It was great. I think that, I'm trying to think of some of the stuff that Gordon told me, that I'll always remember. How these guys, come up and it's kind of similar to getting coffee. They kind of are those kind of things for the established wrestlers. They go through much harder things than getting coffee for people. I'll just put it to you that way.
I'm sure.
But they want their place too. They work hard and they want their place too. It was an interesting time. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Gosh, that sounds so fascinating. So you, how long did you do that?
I did that for about a year.
Okay. How long were you doing the Braves?
I did the Braves for 3 years.
3 years, so 4 years.
Yeah.
Did you go to CNN after that?
Oh, I did CNN.
You just freelanced
while I was working with the Braves, so I would intern at night because I wanted to get some more experience. So I would work my 9 to 5 job, and then I would do the late shift at CNN. So I would do it was in the sports department. And it's funny, Eric, because at 54, there's no way I could do it. But when you're 24,
you can't do it at 30.
Yeah, 3 or 4 hours of sleep, that kind of thing. So I would go and work, and then I would go to CNN. I think like the West Coast games would start at 10 o'clock, so I probably would go in about 9 o'clock, and I would get my sheet. Okay, you're going to be doing the Los Angeles Kings game, and you're going to be doing the Portland Trail Blazers game. And so what you would do is you would log the tapes for highlights, and then the editor would come in and say, okay, tell me, what was the story of this game? And you say, okay, now at 10 minutes, this guy scored a goal. At 12 minutes, here was a fight, those kind of things. And so you'd help the editor. And then those tapes would be given to the CNN Sports Tonight show, and that's where you would see your highlights. A lot of times, back to the production truck, there was a lot of shouting, a lot of, hey, I need this tape. It was a little bit harsher language than that, but you get the idea.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure they were like, pretty please, give me the tape, please.
When you get a minute, if it's not too much trouble, if you're not too busy, could you,
That's the one.
I don't think I heard a lot of that, but you get the idea.
Yeah, that's the one.
Yeah, there's a lot of times where, you would take it, you would finish the tape, and you would just hand it, and whoever else would run it to where they needed to put it in, because the highlight would be up in 3 or 4 minutes. Those kind of things. So sometimes you were working, right to the deadline. And as you know, probably, with your show and some of the stuff that you do, when you do something live, there's no second chance. If you don't have it at 11 o'clock, you can't say, okay, I'll have it in 5 minutes or whatever. It's
right.
gotta have it, So there was, I think that's where a lot of that, the
Yeah.
intensity, I think, came from.
Yeah, for what I do, there's no pause. If I don't have a drink, I don't have a drink. There's no restroom break. We just go.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What I know you said, like be humble or earn your place. What are some of the other lessons you learned in these three energetic jobs? Is passionate jobs? Is that a good way? Fast
Passionate, that's a
paced.
good word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what are some of the other lessons you learned that anyone could apply to their life?
Yeah. I think, and I wish I could write all this down. Maybe I'll send you an email with all the lists.
Yeah,
But
please do.
going
I
down
love
the
it.
list, going down a list, it's like give everything that you have, be humble, always look for an opportunity, but in a good way, not to mess anybody over or anything, but
Yeah.
always look for an opportunity to improve things. Always give your best. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. Never quit, because there's going to be a lot of times, and when we get back to the book, we can get into a little bit more. But there's a lot of times that I found in the book, but also in my life, where it's like, man, boom, I'm hitting that brick wall. Do I quit, or do I sit for a spell and kind of gain myself and then get back on my feet and say, all right, that didn't work. I'm going to go this way. Because there's a lot of times in life where you really put your heart into something and it just doesn't come. You get
Yeah.
denied, or somebody says we're going to go with this person,
Mm.
or I didn't like that video, I'm going to go with something else. Or I find this when I'm querying agents. It's like, I didn't really like your story. There's a lot of times where you can just package it up and say, you know what, forget it. I'm not good enough. I can't do it. But sometimes, you just got to take a breath and say, you know what, that didn't work. I'm going to get up and go again. Because in the end, and like I said, we'll get back to this in the book, when I was able to see this, the
Yeah.
physical copy, after all the time and all the hours and all the early mornings and all that, it's like, man, I am so glad I didn't quit. And I think for your listeners, and for you, Eric, as well,
Yeah.
when we hit that wall and you get up and you succeed at something that you are really passionate about, you're going to say to yourself, my God, oh, I'm so glad I didn't quit. This is so worth it. So I think that's the biggest thing. If I had to put that at the top of the list, is never give in. It's like Winston Churchill said, never give in, never give in, never give in.
Yeah.
And I always remember that.
Gosh, all of that's good advice. I'm sure we could take an hour unpacking all of it. Uh, you mentioned your students. So you teach a class?
Yeah, well, actually, I'm not a professor, but I video production manager. And so what I do is that I have a student staff. And so what we'll do is I do productions for Georgia Tech, and so I'll do a video on the application process, or on one of the athletes, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Students will come to me and they say, well, we've got 4 different shows. So for instance, we have a show called On the Flats, which is a sports show. The student that is in charge of On the Flats will say, I've got an idea. I'd like to interview this tennis player who's an All-American. I'm like, okay, no problem. So what they'll do is they'll do all the interviews, they'll do the editing, then I'll look at the program and then kick it up to my boss. And if it clears everything, then we'll put it out on our network and also on our YouTube page. So that's, and I've got a student staff of 9 students who are all great. And it's funny, Eric, because every one of them that I see, I know is 10 times smarter than me because they're at Georgia Tech. So again, checking your ego at the door. It's like, hey, I'm not even going to compete with that. You're smarter than me. Yeah. I get it.
I feel like everyone I talk to is smarter than me. I'm not hating on myself. I'm just, I know some smart people. I was working the call center I worked with. I was working with people who had master's degrees and were getting PhDs in theology, and from a seminary nearby. So I was like, I grew up a Christian. I read my Bible frequently, but I don't have a PhD. like they're on another level of understanding, and that's the same with anyone who has a PhD. So obviously, your students are creating the films and everything. Do you have opportunities to pour these life lessons into them?
Yeah, I had a couple of students, and one of the flattering things, Eric, is that in my position, I really want to reach the students. I want them to know, hey, if I ever get into trouble, they can call me. Or hey, I'm not sure about this. What do you think about this? Or when you were in college, even though it was back in the Stone Age, when you were in college and this happened, I have a handful of students that still will contact me and say, hey, how you doing? Hey, I just got married. Hey, I just bought a house. Wow. And it's great because I see them. They came. I met them when they were 18, 19, 20 years old, and now I see them with families. They're buying houses. They're getting their master's degrees. Man, Eric, I tell you, it is a wonderful feeling. And it's not because they met me that they went on to all the success. They had the success all along, but it's great seeing them grow from kids into adults now. One of my very favorite students, I was out at Chick-fil-A with my daughter and standing in line. I look over and he's eating dinner with his mother. And so he was like, "Hey, good to see you." So I went over and talked to him and got to talk to his mom for a minute. And I said, "Hey, I don't know what it is that you and your husband do, but I would like to take a course in parenting because you raised one hell of a son here." He was one of my favorite students. And so, I'm sure you're
Yeah.
very proud. And she was just gushing,
Of course.
with pride.
Of
So
course.
those kind of things, you never forget. I had a couple of students that would come to me with, "Hey, I'm not sure. My father wants me to do this. I don't know if I want to go in engineering or if I want to do this." And so, I would talk to them, and obviously I wouldn't tell them, "Hey, you need to do this or whatever," but I would just say, "Well, what do you think?" And just kind of get the conversation going and maybe give them some advice, but not make them think, "Oh, Scott told me to do this," or Ivan Scott told me to do this, so I should do it. So it was great to be able to impart some wisdom to them. And as a matter of fact, last fall, I had a student had showed up at our office out of the blue, and I hadn't seen him in 10, 12 years. And he said, "Hey, I was just on campus, and I knew you were here. I wanted to come see you." And it was great because he was like a full grown man now. I remember him as an
Yeah.
insecure, very shy, kid, and now he's this, very handsome, tall, very assured, that kind of thing. It's like, wow, what a great transition. And it's interesting because he was telling me, it's like, well, I was in Europe for a while and I was in India for a while, and I got to meet George Michael and I got to talk to Elton John, and he gave me his personal phone number, and so I got to
What?
interview him for a magazine I was working
What?
for. And I was like, he's a big music guy, obviously,
That's
and so he would
insane.
say, "Well, I got to interview so and so, and I had a radio show, and I had a magazine that I was doing interviews for, and all this stuff." And Boy George was another one. He was like,
What?
"Yeah, he was a big '80s fan." So he got to talk to Boy George, and Boy
What?
George
That is
still
crazy.
will hit him up sometimes and say, "Hey, how's the magazine going?" That kind of thing. But I guess the point of that whole thing is that meet these kids. They're shy. They're insecure. They're just getting out into the world, and now they come back, 15 years later, and they got the world by the tail.
Yeah.
Wow, it's a wonderful, and it's very flattering when they take time out of their schedule to come see me and tell me what they're doing, and I just love that.
Wow, that has to be so fulfilling for you in that moment to just see that, and like you said, it wasn't just you. There were other
Yeah,
people involved, but to see the transformation and the
yeah,
success, that's got to be
yeah,
so fulfilling for
yeah.
you. Have you ever? I mean, looking back over the students that you've had, has there been any that seemed aimless? Yeah, they were in college, but they didn't really know what they were going to do, and were you able to give them some focus?
Yeah, there are a few that they get there, and I tell them all the time. It's like I don't want to speak for your parents, obviously, but it's okay. Freshman, sophomore year, it's okay to not know what you want to do. When I got into college, I knew I wanted to do communications, I wanted to do broadcasting, I wanted to get into sports, and so I had an idea. Sometimes you don't know what you want to do, but I tell them, it's like, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Actually, that's kind of a good thing because you keep your options open. Maybe there's a calling that you're not sure about. Maybe, wow, I never thought about being an engineer, but now that I think about it, that's me. That's what I
Hmm.
want to do. Or I want to go into business, or I want to be an architect. And I never thought about it before, but now that I've been exposed to it, okay, yeah, I can see that. But I think telling them to keep their options open and exposing themselves into many different things in life, then
Yeah.
maybe that might answer the question for them.
Yeah, I think that's such fantastic advice. That's so fantastic. What I tell people, and this is like, there's that ideology of like you have to love yourself before you can love other people. There's that idea of I'm trying to find myself. I think everyone's been there. Early 20s, I'm trying to find out who I am. But no one sits down and says, "Hey, this is how you find out who you are. This is what you do." And I think what you said, expose yourself to scenarios, things you never tried before. I tell people to get hobbies. Get
Yeah,
hobbies. You've never shot a bow? Go shoot a bow. Go to a range with a friend and see if you like it. You didn't? Okay. Try
yeah,
something else. Find out
yeah,
what you like. And that's how you're going to find out who you are.
yeah. And when you do that, sometimes you like it so much, you become passionate about it, and that becomes your
Yes.
world. Like you said, whether it's hiking or biking or shooting a bow and arrow, that kind of thing. Until you actually expose yourself, You never know. And I don't know, Eric, what you think about this. I'd like to get your
Yeah.
opinion. I kind of feel like everybody has a cause. They have a calling in their life, and it's inside here.
Hmm.
And sometimes we get it, sometimes we don't. Sometimes something happens when we're 25 years old, and it bursts inside of us. It's like, wow, that's what I want to do. And so I think that that's what I tell the students. There's something out there that you were probably meant to do, so don't worry about not knowing right now, but explore, go find it, and it'll
Yeah.
come to you eventually.
Yeah. I agree with that. For me, it was writing. And I didn't know I mean, and in school I always did well in English. Writing stories were always easy. But I had an idea I was 24, 25, and I thought, man, that'd be a cool story for a cool idea for a book. And I was like, you know what, I'll write that book. And that sparked it for me. But along the way, I've tried stuff, hiking up mountains. I never did that before. Some simple stuff like that I found I really enjoy. But yeah, I agree. I think everyone was meant to do something. We're not meant to waste our lives, and you're probably not going to find out what it is until you start trying stuff and finding out what you like. Which is also kind of the idea of the general ed classes in college, right? Let's expose everyone to all this stuff that you may never use, but something may grab you.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing, yeah, you're absolutely right about that because, yeah, something could grab you. But if you get a couple of classes that, like you said, that will grab you, then you start building that base to build off. It's kind of like building a house. We're going to put the first brick here. Oh, wait a minute. I kind of like that. Then another one, another one, another one. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's kind of like the jumping off point.
Yeah. And then I think, the next stage, or even do this along the way, talk to someone who's older than you who has life stories. Like you're by no means an elderly person, but but
I feel like it sometimes.
I feel like it sometimes. If I stay up till 11:30, I'm done. But our culture is kind of like the older generation. They don't know what's going on. We're younger. We know everything better. We probably know how to use tech better, but
Yeah. Yes, you're right.
yeah, but what the younger generation and even my generation, even myself, what we're not doing is we're not having the conversations with the people who know what they're doing. Know what they're doing. Whenever you're 25 and you've never had a conversation with someone who owns a house, how can you understand a mortgage?
Mhm. Yeah.
Right? Like we need to be reaching out, but that's also how you're going to find out what you love to do because you talk to people who are passionate about what they do, what stirs them, which is why I love doing this and meeting with people like you. It's like you're passionate about stuff, you have stories, you've lived a
Yeah.
life, and it comes off as very enticing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, what's interesting also is that I have always been fascinated with people that have very strong opinions and but don't want to listen to other people's
Oh
opinions.
yeah.
Whereas I'm the opposite, and nothing against that. That's just sometimes how the way people are. But I'm kind of the opposite. I'll listen to somebody's opinion if I don't agree with it because you know what? Maybe they're going to tell me something that I didn't know, and it's
That's
like,
right.
oh, well, wait a minute. Okay, yeah, I might still not agree, but I've
That's
just
right.
been enlightened by somebody by
Yeah.
keeping my mind open instead of closing my mind to something.
Yeah.
So I think that's the other thing I would like to hopefully, with the movements that are going on, everybody's going to open up their minds a little bit, and then maybe we'll become more educated, or maybe think about things that we didn't think about before, and maybe be better for it. So that's one of my hopes. But like I said, I've always been fascinated by that, just
No.
opening your mind to
Yeah.
different opinions, different views.
And I think, like, even if you're set in your ways, even if I'm set in my ways, if I listen to other people's opinions, I might hear an argument against my belief that I've never heard
Mm-hmm.
before.
Yeah.
So I have to give it consideration. I have to figure out, how to address it. It's like, the Bible says iron sharpens iron. We can go into all that because obviously it has a theological context. But also the point is, one, you have to make sure you're iron. But two, you have to allow yourself to be sharpened. And that
Yeah.
means coming in contact with someone else who knows what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think you're absolutely right. That's such a good mindset. Have you always been that way, or did something shift along the
Yeah,
way?
it's interesting. I think that as I've gotten older, I think that the mind is kind of opened up because when you're younger, you're very set in. Okay, this is this, and I like this, and I'm not going to deviate from this, and it'd be bad if I did that. That kind of thing. So I think as I've gotten older, it wasn't anything where I went to a class and it taught me to do this,
Hmm.
or I just one day I got hit in the head and whatever. I think it's one of those as you get older, you start wanting to learn more. I think with a lot of things that we don't understand, there's a little bit of a fear there. So
Mm-hmm.
once we start educating ourselves, the fear kind of goes away. And I think that was probably part of it. It's like, wow, as I've learned more and learned to think more and kind of keep my mind open to new ideas, to new opinions, new beliefs, I think that's probably where it came from.
That makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. How how often do you read? You read a lot?
Yep. Oh, actually, you know what? I don't know if I sent you a picture, but I sent you a picture of my well, I call it the Hemingway room, but and I always joke it's like, well, Ernest is going to pull his sponsorship name if
Yeah.
I don't write very good.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but yeah, you should. And I think I sent you a picture. Not I
Uh,
send you a picture.
you sent it to me.
But yeah,
I didn't get it saved, but I didn't get it saved to throw up. But you did send me the picture of it. Yeah.
yeah. So it's I have this huge and I got during the pandemic, which obviously we're still going through. I got bored one day and counted the number of books, and I think I was at 1,304 books, whatever. So I know I'm weak. I'm weak.
Nah, some people are so envious listening to this right now.
Well, anytime anybody wants to come to Atlanta and sit for a spell in the Hemingway room and read or write or whatever, it is always open. So, but yeah, I do, and it goes. But I see you're on the right trail there. Reading, is, kind of opens your mind to new things.
Right.
There's certain things, like I said, I'm a World War II buff, and I'm fascinated by Hitler and the Nazi Party, not because I believe any of that stuff,
Sure.
or endorse that, but I'm always fascinated by how did this one person take a country and turn the whole mindset to the way that Germany was, World War II, that kind of thing. It's like,
Man.
wow, those kind of back to your point though, but reading different books and reading, whether it's World War II or sports books or literature or biographies or whatever, you get exposed to so many life lessons and so many life events that it really gets you thinking and it makes you want to learn more. At least with me, it does.
Yeah. Have you? Speaking of the World War II, this made me think of it. Have you seen the YouTube? This I can't remember who does it, but it's called like biographics. Have you ever heard of
No,
this?
no,
This
wow,
guy.
that sounds cool though.
I'll find it and send you an email or send you a message on Twitter or something with it. But what he does is he sits down, he does like a 15 to 20 minute video of a biography of some people in history, but he does all of Hitler's inner circle.
Oh,
And that made me think of it because he's doing like 8 of these. So he does like the guy in charge of propaganda, the guy in charge of creating Auschwitz, all of that.
oh
And they're each
yeah.
like 20 minute. And they talk like he was born here. This is how he got into everything. This is how he rose to power. I'll send you a link to at least one of them so
Oh,
you can
please
dive
do.
into that.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
love that kind of
when I
stuff.
found those, I listened to like all of them and I was like, this is and he does a very good job. So I'll be sure to send that to you. So if someone comes over to your house, what are some of the books you would recommend? If they're like, hey, I'm looking for something to read, no subject at all. Besides your own book, what are some books that you're going to recommend them to read?
Wow, great God, great question. I like that. I like that question. Um, I would the first thing that I would do well it would depend on the age. If there was somebody
Okay.
a little bit older, first book it would be Old Man in the Sea
Okay.
because when I read that book, I'm like, oh my God, Hemingway wrote exactly how I'm feeling, and that's part of the whole allure about this writing thing. Is like, wow, 70 years ago, I'm having the same feelings as this guy did, and that just, it
Yeah.
always amazes me. And then stuff that Shakespeare writes, it's like, wow, I don't understand a lot of Shakespeare, but stuff I do understand. I will, trust me, I'm not a snob when it comes to this kind of stuff. I'm learning as we go. So
Yeah.
don't think that I know, by Shakespeare and all that. But the stuff that he wrote, I'm like, wow, you can apply that today. Um, I think Old Man in the Sea I would start off with, which is a wonderful story. It's a short story too, so you're not going to take 10 days. I love the Steve Jobs biography. It's a little thick. It's over 500 pages,
Okay.
but going back to your point about what are some of the things that you would do when you're trying to make it in the world and trying to get your feet in the door, that kind of thing. Steve Jobs, the things that he created, and he would say, I want to create this, and the people that he was working with, well, there's no way we can. He's like, no, I didn't hear that. We're going to create this. Okay, you guys figure out a way to create this. And so he never took no for an answer. And look at all the technology that we have now. The iPhone and the iPad and the things that that we do.
Yeah.
When it comes to social media, I think it's good and bad. I think that as far as communications go and those kind of things, like you and I, if it wasn't for social media,
Right.
we probably wouldn't have connected. the book wouldn't have been, what it is right now, because I wouldn't have been able to, send it out, free of charge, on Twitter, the information about
Right,
it on
right, yeah.
Twitter or on Instagram, that kind of thing. I think there's some bad things as well to social media. I think that, people, putting up their views, and then when other people put their views up, and then it escalates and they say bad things about them and so on, it's, I think that's one of the drawbacks to it. But back to the Steve Jobs, some of the greatest things that we have now were because he never quit. And you read that in the biography. I mean, he was tough to work with, and he had his, his ego, and he had his opinions, and he had his work ethic and all that. But because of him, look at what we have today. So that would
Right.
be another book that I would think about. Um, there's a couple of Vince Lombardi books. Not so much. I mean, yeah, the football is great. He was, doing great things for the Packers. And I'm a Lions fan, so it's tough for me to say that. But the thing that I like about Lombardi is that he talked. One of the things about was, he wanted to mold his players to be good football players, but he wanted more for them to be good men, be
Mm.
good fathers, be good husbands, give back to the community. And
Mm.
one of the things he really lamented about when he was dying in '69, and of course in the late '60s and early '70s, there was a lot like we see today with the protests and the unrest and all that. And one of the things he talked about was is that, obviously he was sad about dying. That's a given. But he said, there's so much work that needs to be done, and I'm not going to be here to try to help to get it done, because he
Mm.
saw that, people should apply themselves here. One of the great statements that, I've always kind of taken to heart is he talked about how when people are down and they're not working, or they're kind of thrown in the towel, that kind of thing. Yes, we should care for them, and that's important. But don't forget the people that are achieving, that are working hard, that are getting promoted, that are winning championships, that are
Mm.
being successful. Because I think sometimes in our lives we look at the people that are successful and we kind of poo-poo them a little bit and think, oh well, they didn't work hard, or well, we should really look at these people that are kind of down on their luck and let's help them more you know than these people that are successful. Because I think that when you work hard and you're successful and you give back, then you should be recognized, and you should be, not poo-pooed as,
Right.
as he's successful, he makes a lot of money, those kind of things. So I think that was one thing that Lombardi said that I really took to heart is, yes, we should help the people that are down on the luck, but also don't forget those that have been successful and that are giving back to the world.
Gosh, that's so good.
Yeah, that would be another book.
That
Any of
sounds
the
like
Vince
a great
Lombardi
book.
books. Yeah. Um, and there's a couple books I have. Winston Churchill is I want to say a mentor of mine. I obviously never met him, although I am old. People would say, "Wow, were you in grade school?" Those kind of things. Obviously, never met the man, but a lot of the things that he wrote about, especially in World War II, about never giving up, never giving in. This is a formidable opponent. I don't know how we're going to do this, but we're going to do this. I've got a book about his speeches, and sometimes I'll look when I'm kind of feeling a little bit, low. I'm getting rejections on my queries from trying to send my book out, or I'm trying to get, an interview in a magazine or something, and people are like, no, we don't want you, that kind of thing. And
Mhm.
sometimes, this is real life. I try to be upbeat, try to be positive, but sometimes you just hit that wall and you
Yeah.
think, man, I'm the worst writer ever. I'm the worst person ever. Those kind of things. So I'll go back to the Winston Churchill books and look at his speeches, and those words really will resonate with me. And so if somebody were to come to my library and I think, well, why don't you read this? This will kind of give you a big
Man.
upbeat. I've got another book, famous speeches from around the world. There's Martin Luther King, there's Nelson Mandela, there's John F. Kennedy, there's all the great leaders of the world, in their speeches and their words of wisdom to people. And so I would say, hey, this is a great book. Read this book because you can really get a lot
Man.
out of it. A lot of times I'll read those books and it's like, well, wow, what was I so depressed about? Okay, I'm gonna get back on my 2 feet. I'm gonna go query the next person, or I'm gonna talk to the next person about an interview. And so, those words from the past sometimes can really shape the present, and that's a big help.
That book sounds incredible. First off, every book you described sounds incredible, but that last one, the famous speeches in history, I might pick that up
You
on
know
your
what? I'll send
recommendation.
you a link. You can probably get it off of Thrift Books, which is my go-to for used books, which cheap books, but they're books nonetheless. So I will be happy to send you a link to that,
Yeah,
because I think that's where we got it from. But I think you would really enjoy it.
yeah, please do. That sounds so great. I remember this has nothing to really do with anything, but I remember I was in seventh grade and we had to like write a debate paper or something, And I don't even remember what the guy was debating or like pitching support of or whatever. But I remember he ended it with by quoting Abraham Lincoln at the Gettysburg Address. And I was just
Uh-huh.
like, oh my gosh. I mean, he knocked it out of the park. I have no idea what he was talking about, but I was like, man. But then, like, it's so crazy, like, whenever you think about, we think there's an idea that goes around that because we live at a later date, we are smarter than everyone who went before us. But then you sit down and you read Lincoln and you read Churchill. And Lincoln, you're first off, you're like, I don't know what half these words mean. So clearly I'm not as smart as him. But second, like you just read their thought process and you realize like we've strayed so far from sitting down and contemplating ideas as a culture in a whole. I know there's still people out there doing it, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Eric, ask you this, and I've kind of batted this around for a while. Do you think that the way that social media is now and communications are now, where it's like, okay, I got to have it immediate. I gotta, if I need something, boom, I'm gonna go here, and that kind of thing. Sometimes, in my mind, I think that we have lost the passion, or we've lost the identity to read a book.
Yeah.
We've lost the identity of words. We've lost that. Those things that the history, if you don't remember history, you're doomed to repeat it, those kind of things. And I think that looking back at some of these things, like you talked about Abraham Lincoln and Churchill and Mandela and Martin Luther King,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, their words of wisdom were so powerful. They're still true today, no matter if it's
Yeah.
50, 100 years, whatever. And so sometimes I think with the communication that we have now and the social media we have now, we really lose that. And maybe that's part of one of the things that I would say are bad about,
Yeah.
the way things.
I think there's obviously a lot of factors that go into it. The 140 character limit, you can only use so many words.
Yeah.
I think aspects of the education system, as it is, some communities will not learn the same detail of words, the same variety of words as other people. But I think the last thing you said, I mean, those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. I mean, we're walking into dangerous territory right now, where we're saying no, let's take this down because the past that it references was terrible. Yes, it was, but if we erase it, what's the future look like?
Yeah.
Like we have to have those reminders to say no, we can't go back to that.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Um,
Um, I mentioned Hitler earlier, and like I said, I do not follow any of his thing, but I love watching documentaries on Hitler, or I love reading books about Hitler, just to like you said, because you don't want to repeat the
right.
past. What if somebody were to take those off the air, or what if somebody were to take those books and say, you know what, this was a bad, and he was a bad person,
Terrible.
but this stuff here we need to. And so to your point, I totally agree. The statues, obviously I understand that, and I have empathy because they represent something that people are very passionate about, something that was a very bad injustice. I was talking with a guy that I worked with, an African American gentleman, and he was a history major, and I asked him about it, and he said, you know what, I wish they wouldn't take the statues down. And I was a little surprised. And he said, but what we should do is we should put them in a museum, because we want people to understand history. We don't want to wipe history away.
Mm.
It wasn't good, but good or bad, we still need to remember our history. And I
Yeah.
worry sometimes, people like the before mentioned Hitler and also Stalin wanted to erase history for whatever reason. And I just hope that doesn't happen here, because we do need to remember history, the good and the bad. I'll give you an example. What if they pulled Schindler's List? It was a very, very intensely tough movie, especially if you are Jewish.
Yeah.
Would you take that out of the movie theaters? Would you take it off TV, because it is a very bad racial injustice against them? And I just hope they don't do those things, because those are the things we do need to remember, good and bad.
Yeah, I agree. Have you read 1984?
I have, and I
Yep.
thought exactly. I thought the quotes that
Yeah.
things that are happening today. I'm like, oh my god! I thought it was just fiction in a book.
It seems like it couldn't just be fiction, right? But I mean, it was. But that book is so crazy. And like to the other point, like obviously, like what I'm about to say seems hypocritical, contradictory. With the amount of media that we get hit with, social media, the whole entertainment industry, which I'm a part of. I write books, you write books. like us authors, we provide entertainment.
Yeah.
But whenever you sit down and you have all these shows and movies on Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, all these books to read, you don't have time to think. All the music all the new albums that are flying out, you don't have time to think.
Yeah.
And we got to
I agree.
think.
I agree.
That's one of the most, to me, and I don't know if you experienced this, that was one of the most eye-opening things that happened when I started writing books.
Mhm.
Is I was like, I not only do I have to create this whole world and all, because I write fantasy, I got to create everything,
Yeah.
but you have to think. You have to think. And I'm sure it's the same with, like, when you're doing your film stuff.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it totally is, because the creative process has to go, because you could basically, I've got a picture and I've got audio and I've got graphics. Okay, that's nice, but I have to make them do something. I have
Right.
to make them attractive enough for somebody to be interested to want to watch it. I don't know about you, but when I hear a song, going back to what your point about thinking, sometimes when I listen to that song, my mind will go back to 1986
Mm.
when I was in college, and I remember when that song was out. Oh, this is who I was hanging out with. This is what was going on, or this is a song my father and I listened to. That kind of thing. So I think that there are those opportunities to think. It's tough. You have to actually physically will yourself to do it,
Right.
but I think there are those opportunities there. And I mean, it doesn't happen every time, but especially older songs or an older book or
Yeah.
an older story, or if you go through your high school yearbooks. I did that back in May, just because like I said, I was bored, I needed a distraction. Went through the yearbooks and I saw the people that had written in the books and all that, and it's like, well, I haven't talked to these people in 30 years or whatever, but it got me to thinking, and I was like, oh, well, I remember when this person signed this, and I remember the story that they mentioned here, and then it takes you to different parts of your life. So there are those opportunities to think, and just hopefully we can find them.
Yeah. Gosh, yeah. I agree with you so much. I agree with you. Yeah. I mean, there's just like little things that people can do. Like when I'm at home, I try not to look at my phone. I do because I'm doing this, so I have to interact with the people, and I do try to like promote books and do all that. So there is a certain amount of time where I literally have to be doing the thing. But
Yeah.
aside from that, like I just put my phone down because like I have more important stuff to do in my life than stare at my phone.
Yeah.
And
Back to, okay, that would be reason number three.
yeah,
Phones and all that, it takes away from your life. No, it absolutely
yeah,
is true. So,
yeah. I mean, it's beneficial. We have like almost all the information in history at our fingertips. We can learn the basics of whatever we want. I'm not gonna say, well, we can learn whatever we want. We can learn the basics of whatever we want. But at the same time, like you got to read the books.
yeah.
You gotta you can learn the basics, but you have to seek the knowledge. Is kind
Yeah.
of what I think.
Well, I think that part of this, like, you're on the right track here. I think with the media, with social media, and with communications now, where, okay, I want my email right now. I need this call right now. I need this text right now. Whereas when you sit down and read a book, you're invested in that book, and it's
Yeah.
not going to come on. Boom. Okay, I just did chapter one. It's like, no, I'm going to take 15 minutes, or I'm going to take 20 minutes, and I'm going to read chapter one, but also I'm going to digest chapter one and understand this is what this person looks like. This is what the plot is unfolding as. This is the scene, that kind of thing. And so it's like you read a line, and immediately in your mind you're thinking, okay, I can see that sunset. Oh, I can see that person walking on the beach. And I think that with, like I said, with the communication now, you're on your phone. I think you lose that. But when you get into a book, it's so much different. And that's one of the things I think that we've lost now. So.
So you majored in communications, and obviously you did this for a while. What was there a moment when you realized the shift in communication was happening?
Yeah, I think that with the Facebook, I think when Facebook hit, that was the
Really?
first domino to fall, and then Twitter after that, and then Instagram. And I know that I'm not a social media expert, but in my mind, Facebook was the first big thing that came that kind of changed the landscape a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it was great because it's like, wow, I haven't talked to this person in 20 years. They're on Facebook now. We could, whatever, and but if you use it for that, yeah, sure, that's fine. But I tell my kids all the time, because they're young and impressionable, I'm like, whatever you do, you can, text your friends or whatever. Don't talk about religion. Don't talk about politics. Those are very things that people are very passionate about. And yeah, if you want an explosion right there, if you want to talk to them in a private message or
Sure.
whatever, that's fine. And I'm not. And what I mean by that is that. Not that politics and religion are bad, that kind of thing. But those are the hottest button topics for people. And it's like you put something out there, somebody doesn't like it, it's going to be just
Yeah.
yeah. So that's why I tell them to stay away from
I think that's fair, and that kind of brings me up to something I contemplate. I think I heard it somewhere, but it kind of resonated with me. It's like we as a culture have lost the ability to have a debate, and everything is instantly an argument.
it. Yes. Yeah.
And that's like the total wrong mindset because things change through debate. Like present your ideas, I'll present mine. We'll have a conversation. Who's kind of putting up the best argument? Who's got the best reasoning here?
Yeah. Well, Eric, go back to when you were talking about the debate. When you were, I think, writing the paper for the debate. Is that the?
No, it was just like a seventh grade project thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you probably could remember back to it, but I think that going back to what you said, the debate, having a debate, not an argument, but a debate.
Right.
You're sitting 5 feet away from somebody.
Right.
A lot of times that's very constructive, and not to say people might raise their voice or get agitated, whatever, but it's a lot different when you're hiding behind a computer, because when you're hiding behind a computer, you can you're the biggest, baddest person in the world, and I can use this profanity and and nothing will happen to me. And so I think that's another thing with the social media that people, it goes back to what you were talking about. You can't have a debate because I'm going to slam you with my opinion, but I'm safe because you can't do anything. You can post another message, but then I'll post another message to over-trump your message and that kind of thing. But when you actually sit 5 feet away from somebody, it's a lot different.
And do this. What we're doing now, we're just talking.
Yeah.
Talking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I first couple of years at Georgia Tech, we had a couple of students that we had done something wrong with one of the playbacks in the movies, whatever. So they would send us these very angry, very chippy emails, and they were really rough and whatever. So what we would do is, instead of sending back our rebuttal, we would say, we apologize for this. Why don't you come down to our office and we'd be happy to sit with you, and discuss what happened and that kind of. And most times we would never hear from them again, that kind of thing, because it basically, and I don't want to say we were trying to be tough guys and call them out and that kind of thing, but it's like, let's have a discussion about this instead of you slamming us. And yeah, we were in the wrong for this, but instead of you slamming us, let's sit down and let's discuss between you and me, like men or women, whoever was responding. Let's sort this out so it doesn't happen again, and have a nice discussion. And that way we kind of see eye to eye on things, and then we go from there. But yeah, I think the way things are now, it's a lot easier to slam somebody because you can hide behind a computer.
I agree with you. Now, before people think that we're just, or I don't want to speak for you, but I think you're going to agree with what I say. Before people think we're just bashing them, we're coming after them, we're slamming them for their lifestyle or whatever, we can get back to having debates. We can get back to interacting with people once COVID's over. We can get back to, this progressive movement, but the problem is, to progress, you have to know where you're progressing to, and we got to have that discussion to figure out where we're actually trying to take things. That's what I think. So, you're clearly a very motivational guy. You're very energetic, happy. How'd that come about? Have you always been that way?
I think I have.
Really?
Yeah, I a lot of times, and like I said before, there's times where I get down and I'm like, wow, I'm the worst writer ever. I shouldn't even be writing books, that kind of thing. And then you kind of sleep it off. And the next morning you wake up and you're like, okay, I'm back on it again. So yeah, I've always kind of been like that. A lot of times when I get rejections, and we'll get back into the rejections on the book here, but like today, I got 2 rejections on the second book that I'm working, that I'm querying on. And yeah, it's like a punch in the face. You're like, wow, gosh, they hated it, they rejected it, whatever. And then I feel bad about it. And then, I think to myself, maybe a half hour later, or maybe 5 minutes later, however long it takes, you know what, this is just going to make me want to work harder, because I want to work hard enough to prove to that person, you know what, you should have given me the chance while you had the opportunity. I'm going to make it so you're going to think this is the biggest mistake you've ever made in the professional world by not giving me a chance. And so I think that's kind of, that's a motivating thing. And you probably know this as well, because you're a writer too. When you send your story out and somebody rejects it or whatever, it's like, yeah, it hurts, because these
time
books, they're like your baby.
Every time.
But, if you look at it and say, you know what, I'm going to work hard enough so that one day you're gonna regret not giving me an opportunity.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that in me, and I completely understand that mindset. I eventually came just to this decision where, like, if you get an agent, their job is to sell your book, so they have to be 100% in.
Yeah.
But I also need them to be 100% in because I'm going to be 100% in. So
Yeah.
if an agent's not going to do that for whatever reason makes them back away from it,
Yeah.
it just wasn't for them. There's someone out there who it's going to click with.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, this, if I'll make up a name, if Stephanie turns it down, okay, this wasn't for Stephanie. Maybe Michelle or Michael, whoever, maybe it's for them.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep working.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're right. It stings every single time. Sometimes it stings less.
Yeah. Sometimes, well, it's funny. I got a rejection from an agent last week, and usually you get the form rejection, and
Sure,
everything.
yeah.
But the agent sent it back and said, I really enjoyed the story, but like you said, it's not for me. But I encourage you to keep going. I see some really good parts in this.
Yeah.
Just polish it up. Just keep working on it. I'm behind you all the way. And it was kind of like, it's like Winston Churchill said, when you're able to have enough tact to tell somebody to go to hell, but they enjoy the trip when they're going, that's when you know that, and I felt that way. It's like, wow, I just got kicked to the curb, but it was like the best
Yeah.
trip I ever took,
Yeah,
So,
I've experienced that, and then I just met with someone, Caitlin Anderson, and she queried for years for her book, and she was getting rejections, and they would say, "Hey, you need to work on this. Hey, you need to work on this." So the whole time she did put in the work, edited all that, and eventually got the book sold.
yeah,
So like, yeah, any rejection that gives you actual feedback is helpful. It
yes, very,
stings, but it's helpful.
oh yeah,
It's helpful.
yeah,
And one time I think about, I listen to Brandon Sanderson a lot. He's a big fantasy author, but he said he's like a best time seller. But he says like he still gets rejections on some of his ideas. So it's like, man, if he's still getting rejected, like it's just part of the game.
yeah,
It's just part of the game. But like like baseball, football, like, you got to play the game. The
yeah,
only way you're going to win is if you play the game.
yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you know the motivational speaker or heard of Eric Thomas.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, look him up on YouTube. Great motivational speaker. He's a lot of his stuff I have listened to, especially when I need kind of a boost. And he said he's got a million great quotes, but one of them that I always remember is that you only lose when you quit. And I think about that sometimes. It's like, yeah, I just lost. I got a rejection and all that. And it's like, no, I didn't lose. Because I didn't quit. Okay, I'm
Right.
on to the next rejection. Like I said, I got 2 rejections today. From these agents in an agency. Well, I had a list of like 3 different agents from that agency. So it's like, okay, boom, rejection here. Let me go to the next one. Boom, send another query.
Yeah.
So it's back to that whole thing. You only lose when you quit.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What I think you said, like, you mentioned you read Churchill when you hit that wall. What else do you do when you hit that wall to kind of bounce back? Because I think a lot of people out there, they're in the trenches of querying, and they're going to hit that wall.
Drink a lot of bourbon. Yeah. Yeah. Eric, that's a great question. And I'll just give you I don't know if I mentioned this before with Redhead. I queried 303 agents.
303.
Yeah, 303, and nobody. Either they didn't respond or it was a rejection.
Sure.
So it was very humbling. It was tough, but with every rejection I got, like you said, it stung. But I kind of turned it inside out, and I'm like, okay, rejection, boom, I'm on to the next one. Okay, did rejection,
Yeah.
okay, fine. Okay, what else can I do? Boom, self-publishing. I researched self-publishing and self-published it through Amazon and Barnes & Noble. So I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to let anybody dictate what I can and can't do. I think it's a great story. And fortunately, the reviews that I've had on it have kind of backed up, my thoughts. And so, when somebody says, wow, I really love this book, it was inspirational, then I go back to that thing, wow, I'm so glad I didn't quit, because there was a million times I could have said, you know what, I don't have it. I'm not a writer. Here's evidence. There's 303 people that say I'm not a writer. So I'm just throwing the towel and quit. But fortunately I didn't. So yeah.
Yeah. Good job for keep going. That's amazing.
Okay.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
303 is a lot. I don't know what I'm at. I'm not at 303 right now, but Maybe one day.
Well, I hope nobody ever gets to 203. So yeah, yeah, there was lots of times, and it's funny. I have a spreadsheet,
Oh yeah,
and everybody listed out and the date that the query was sent, and like little notes, like okay, they wanted the first 10 pages, or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
So when I would get a rejection, I would highlight the cell in red.
Oh yeah, me too.
So by the time I got all my stuff, all this red over it, I would joke to my wife. I said, "Man, it looks like an invite list to the Communist Party because it was filling up with
Just
red
nothing
lines
but red.
everywhere." Stuff. So the reason why I mentioned that, and I would tell people too, I'd say, "Wow, Stalin came to visit me today and rejected me."
Oh man,
The
you went
reason why
hard.
I mentioned, yeah, it was So, but the reason why I tell you that, and hopefully your listeners will appreciate this and kind of get some inspiration from it, is yes, it stings, it's terrible, whatever. But if you can make a joke out of it, and if you can laugh at
Yeah,
it and laugh at yourself, that kind of eases the hurt a little bit more. And it kind of, with me, I kind of laughed about it. I'm like, okay, boom, where's the next one? So
yeah. And I think you're bringing up a good way to bounce around and recover from the rejection and the hurt that comes with it. But like ultimately, it's kind of like you have to do the grind if you want the payoff at the end.
oh
And
yeah,
like it's really easy now, instant gratification, instant connection with everyone, but you have to do the grind. Like any band out there that's big, they grinded for years. Authors have to the grind. So if you're in the grind, keep going. Keep going.
yes. Well,
Keep
in
going.
Eric Thomas, the speaker I told you
Yeah.
about, he talks about all the time. He's like, you have to enjoy the grind. You have to enjoy the process. When you enjoy the grind and the process, you're going to be successful. You can't just say, okay, wow, game time, I'm ready to go. Whoa, whatever. It's like you have to work hard. You have to
Yeah.
prepare. Like you said, you have to enjoy the grind. You have to get in the grind and not give up.
Right.
So I'm glad that you mentioned that, because the grind, for all your listeners out there, you have to go through the grind. Once you go through the grind, that's when you're successful.
Yeah. Gosh, so motivating. I could talk to you for I feel like forever. We're at almost an hour and a half, so I'd like to hit you with just some lightning round questions, and I'd like to finish it out on a positive note.
Sure.
Is there anything about the book you want to talk about? I'm just gonna hit you with lightning round, just general life stuff. So, is there anything
Yeah.
else about the book you want to throw out?
Okay, this book.
Yep.
Go ahead and read the first one. 303 rejections. My wife was one of the inspirational characters behind it. Billy is one of the inspirational characters that I kind of molded myself after. It's a great story about overcoming adversity, finding the things that you're passionate about, like we talked about tonight,
Mm-hmm.
coming together, working together, and then going off and keeping those life lessons and becoming better for it.
Amazon, Barnes and Noble.
Amazon.com, Barnes and Noble. Yep.
All right, guys, go check it out. We'll hit you with some quick questions real quick, and then we'll wrap it up here. What's an afternoon like for you, or a Saturday like for you? Just a lazy Saturday. What are you gonna do?
Yeah, usually it involves kids' sports. So I will be taking our daughter, Sophia, to her soccer game or her basketball game or her lacrosse game.
Okay.
Or with my son, Alex, he's a techno, he loves electronics. And so he's showing me stuff on his iPad. He's doing his Minecraft. And so I'm working with him. And then if I'm ever fortunate, my wife and I will have some time alone and we will go out on a date.
What's an ideal date?
Don't happen very often because of the kids, but we
Yeah.
try.
What's an ideal date? Or if you're allowed to talk about it on the air.
Oh, absolutely. Well, let's see, the part when we're out or the part when we come home? Oh, okay. The part when we're
the part where you're out, because the kids are at home. So
yes. Well, I will give you the quick. My wife knew that I was kind of working on a book, but she didn't know 100%, and so I worked on the book in secret. Finally, I took her to one of the restaurants in Buckhead, where part of the book takes place, and it was a big surprise. I had wrapped the book up as a present, and I gave it to the manager, and I had this all set up before we went. The manager put together a special menu for the meal.
Wow.
With food that was inspired that we talked about in the book. So when the meal began, they had roses on the table. We had the best table. We had a view of Peachtree Street. I mean, it was just all this stuff set up. They brought the book over, and she started getting teary-eyed, and she's like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you finished it. I didn't even know you were doing this and all." So that was, I'll always remember that.
Yeah.
And I have pictures on my Instagram and on Facebook of her with the book and of us that evening. But that was an ideal date. I think that anytime that Kim, my wife's name is Kim, I think anytime Kim and I can go out, like for instance, we went out for lunch yesterday because that was the only time that we had. And just spending an hour with her, like you said, it was like an ideal dream date. So any time I can get with her, I think is ideal.
Yeah. Before I hit the next question, you mentioned Buckhead. Is that near Decatur, Georgia?
No, it's Buckhead is so you have Buckhead, and then you have Midtown, and then you have downtown. Decatur is more east of Atlanta.
Okay, so because
Yeah.
I spent time in the Dallas Fort Worth area. I don't know if you
Okay.
know where that's at. It's like
Oh,
10 minutes from Decatur.
um,
Fort Worth,
Decatur,
Decatur.
Fort Worth.
I don't know. Decatur, Georgia.
Yeah, Decatur. So, but you said Fort Worth.
Fort Worth, yeah, downtown Fort Worth. I
Okay.
think
So is that close to Decatur
it was like
or
10, 15 minutes down the road. 10 minutes down the road.
oh?
I think, unless I'm just completely not remembering the place I lived correctly,
Okay.
which is
We
a
can talk about
possibility. Which
that.
is a possibility. Okay. Anyway,
Okay.
uh, what's an ideal meal? If you get to sit down, this is your favorite thing to eat.
Yeah. Bone and ribeye.
Oh, that's a
Yeah.
big
Bone and
one.
ribeye, big baked potato, Caesar salad, a bourbon to start the meal.
Oh my gosh,
Um,
you just described my
uh,
wife's what she wants every night. Except she doesn't drink the bourbon, but
oh,
she
okay.
would have
Okay.
steak and
I
potato
just fell
every
in
night.
love with your wife then.
Yeah,
She loves
yeah,
steak. That's
she's
great.
great. So,
Yeah, steak and potato Caesar salad, and yeah, that's my perfect meal.
where you got friends come in from out of town? Where are you gonna take them?
I'm going to take them to a town north of Atlanta, Roswell, where they have antique shops, cool little restaurants. It's a small little, a small community, but they have a cool little town square where there's all these like row of buildings with little restaurants and shops and cool places. It's an older, place, not very crowded, because it's kind of away from the epicenter.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where I would take them.
That sounds great. That sounds great. Sounds so wonderful. Before I hit you with another question, we didn't talk about your interview on Simply Buckhead.
Yes.
How'd that come about? What was that about? What happened there?
Okay. Well, as an independent author, you have to scratch and claw your way to find places that you can promote the book. Social media will only take you so far, so you have to branch out.
Mm-hmm.
So I was getting my car serviced, and in the dealership, I was in the waiting room, and they have all magazines and stuff on there. So I was going through the magazines, and I'm thinking, okay, and a lot of them are like, Simply Buckhead magazine, the Atlanta magazine, trying to think, there's a couple others. And so I'm thinking, okay, go in there, find out who the editor is or whoever owns the magazine. Find out how to contact them. Send them your pitch. Say I'm a local author. Here's my book. It takes place in Atlanta. Boom. So that's how it happens. So with Simply Buckhead magazine, I think this was in November or December. So I made my first contact then. She said, I really don't have anything yet. Check back with me later. Check back with her in January. She's like, well, I do have something in May. I'm like, absolutely, I will.
Great. Anything, right?
Until May. It could have been like May 2030.
Yeah.
I thought, sure,
Let's do it.
any place.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she interviewed me, and basically, we had a phone interview and asked questions. I mean, it was great. It was really my first, print interview, which was kind of cool. But yeah, that's how it came about, and I think that it was neat because the majority of the book, almost all the book, takes place in Buckhead. So Simply Buckhead magazine was a perfect place for it because people in Buckhead are going to read it. So they're going to say, "Oh, well, I know where that is. I know where that place is. And I know where that street is." So, yeah. So that's how it came about.
That's awesome. I'll leave a link in the description so people can go check out that interview as well. Um, if you take a vacation from work, you're gonna whatever take a week off. Assuming you're not working on your books or anything, and you're actually just gonna take a week off from everything. What are you gonna do?
We're going to go to Hilton Head in South Carolina, to the beach in South Carolina.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
so
great.
that's our family vacation every summer. And with the COVID and everything, we were a little worried about everything. But right as of now, it's still on, so
Okay.
that could change.
Be
But
careful.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, the social distancing and all that, absolutely. But yeah, that's our favorite place to go. And like you said, if I'm going to go someplace for a week, it's going to be Hilton Head. I have very fond memories of the place. I remember when we brought our kids there when they were in little carriers. So it's a place that I always will love and look forward to. Every July we always go. So that's the place that I would go. And
Awesome.
actually, as a spoiler hint, my second book takes place in Hilton Head.
Oh, that's good. Something
Yeah.
that's good. Well, hey, your book sounds absolutely phenomenal. You're an amazing person. Very
Thank you.
motivational. just so much wisdom to just impart in people. I hope everyone enjoyed it. I had a fantastic time. Is there anything you want to say before we end it up here?
No, the only thing I can say is, Eric, thank you so much for having me on your show. I wish
Please.
you nothing but the best. You got
Thanks.
a great thing going, and and hopefully we can stay in touch, because I think both
Absolutely.
of us, with our motivation and our writing and all that, definitely can help each other. So
Yes.
it's been a pleasure to be here, and I'm so glad that you took time out of your schedule to have me
Thanks.
on.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I tell you, I think I benefited from it maybe more than you did. So, so thanks. Good. Yeah. No, we'll definitely stay in touch. Your book, Redhead in a Blue Convertible, on Amazon. Guys, check it out. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next time.